Great. Thank you very much for the introduction. So yeah, that was our title. Growing up in a changing environment, what really influences what young people eat? But I thought we'd get warmed up a little bit, just with a bit of interactive work. So starting with this first question, and I hope you've all had a chance to have a look at Mentimeter, give your response, think about it a little bit, and we'll see what we've got. So, did you take a sweet to eat on the way in? Of course, it's a trick. It's a talk about diet. And quite a few of you did. I mean, not that many people seem to be wanting to participate, but of those who are participating, quite a few have been taking sweets, eating sweets. And then I want you to think a little bit about why you had your sweet. So we've got another follow-up question. Obviously, this is for those of you who did eat sweets. Why did you choose to eat a sweet this evening? I've put a few suggested answers. Obviously, you might have a different answer, but maybe try and pick one that matches reasonably well with what you were thinking when you came in, you saw those sweets there. I'll just give you a few minutes to log in and have a go, those of you that want to. What have we got? So most people were like, well, they're there, they're free, I like sweets. Some of you always eat sweets, one of you always eats sweets in the evening. It's part of something that you do every day. It's a normal activity. I suppose there's the possibility that you'd actually thought about it and you'd like, right, this evening, part of my daily diet, the things that I eat every day, I'm going to eat street sweets. It's possible that you planned and you chose. But it's more likely that you saw them, you thought they look nice, you thought they don't cost much. Nobody said I was pressured into taking one. I thought that's, if the people on the door had been a bit more pushy with their bowl of sweets, maybe some of you would have thought, oh, okay, yes, I better do that. But yeah, just to start thinking, there's lots of different reasons why we eat what we do. So I'll come out to that for a minute. And obviously we're here today to talk about diet. And there's a lot of news about diet. We're fairly well aware that diet is something that affects our health. I just picked a few stories that I saw recently. So low-carb diets related to type 2 diabetes. Eggs could be good for your risk of cardiovascular disease. And then a couple of stories about processed meat and ultra-processed foods could be related to cancer. So we see from the newspapers, from the television, that there are links between diet and health. And sometimes these news stories get a bit stronger than I would maybe write a news story based on the actual evidence. Sometimes there seems to be a bit more of pushing the headline rather than looking at the detail of the science. But overall, we have pretty good evidence that diet is related to health. And actually, there was a global study in 2012 that tried to quantify the burden of disease around the world that's related to diet. And they estimated that 10% of all of global burden of disease is linked to poor diet. So, we know that diet's important. The UK government actually gives us fairly clear guidelines about what we should and should not be eating. But we also know from the data that most people are not actually following these guidelines. So that's what we're here to talk about today, why we eat what we eat, particularly focusing on adolescence and thinking about what drives our behaviours around diet. So I'm Eleanor Winpenny, and you're also going to hear from Tiago, Canelas and Struan, Tait, and we all work in the MRC Epidemiology Unit, where we do research linking the environment that surrounds us to our behaviours and to our diet, and trying to understand what's really going on in this space. And so today, like I said, we want to focus on adolescence. The word adolescent comes from the Latin adolescere, which is to grow to maturity. So this is really a time of growth. So obviously, we know in adolescence that people are still growing physically, maturing biologically, but actually their brain is still developing. So they're still growing psychologically. They're still developing their social role in the world. And they're moving from a situation where they're mostly influenced by their parents and by the things that have been around them in their childhood, and starting to sort of move out from that sphere of influence to a more independent role in society. So they're growing to maturity, and one definition of maturity is a stable, independent role in society. And obviously, we're researchers, we like to put some numbers on that, but it's quite difficult to define when we get to the age where we are stable and independent and mature. But typically, people tend to think of the age range from 10 to 24. So it's going on beyond 18, sort of into those early adulthood years where people are still developing, so up to age 24. And then I guess the question is, why do we want to talk about adolescence? When you think about adolescence, you tend to think of mostly a healthy population, probably quite thin, not that really influenced by chronic diseases that tend to occur further down the line. But actually, if we look at the data, particularly on overweight and obesity, as you get towards the end of adolescence and into early adulthood, that's where we actually see the steepest rise in overweight and obesity through adulthood. And we can see from this graph, this is data from the Health Survey for England, but we can see that by the age of by people's early 30s, around 50% are already overweight or obese. So actually, if we want to think about prevention, and in our world we do always want to think about prevention, we want to catch people before they get to that age. Think about how to keep people healthy in adolescence, how to help them develop healthy habits before they become overweight and obese. And the other thing, like I said, is this is a period of development. It's a period when people are changing their behaviours, reacting to the world around them, developing their independent lifestyle, and that means there's still some flexibility in terms of their habits and their behaviours. And so if we can tap into people before they've got to a more sort of stable adult period, we can try and support people to develop healthier habits and behaviours before they become sort of entrenched in adulthood. So, what do adolescents eat? What did you eat as adolescents? Maybe something a bit like this. Maybe something a bit like this. These are all stereotypes, of course. Actually, talking to my young person's advisory group on one of our studies, they talk about quite a lot of different sort of diets. And this is a still from a YouTube video made by a Korean pop star. And apparently, among this age group, the K-pop diets are very popular, weight loss diets followed by Korean pop stars who then popularise what they're eating and share videos like this on social media. So actually, there's quite a wide variety of what people might be eating in adolescence. So again, I want you to think for a second, go back to your phones if you can, and think about what influenced your diet as an adolescent. And, I mean, some of you may still be adolescents, but if not, you'll have to think back, think what was going on in your life back then, and try and work out, you know, what was influencing you in the world around you. So we've got some things coming up. Parents are still quite big in adolescence. Friends starting to play a part. We've got school and school meals, and of course the school environment is somewhere where you're quite constrained as an adolescent in terms of what's provided, what's available. You can bring your packed lunch in, but probably under some constraints. Peer pressure, housemates. So yeah, there's some more coming out around friends. That's interesting, yeah. Peers and peer pressure and social pressure seems to come up a lot for adolescents. All right, well, we'll leave that there. Go back to this. So if we want to analyse what's going on in adolescence in terms of the environment, how's the environment influencing diet? One of the reasonably sensible ways to go about that is to try and look at changes in the environment and how that might be related to changes in diet. And so, like I've mentioned, there's some benefits to studying this period because actually there's a lot that's changing during adolescence. Oh dear. Do you have any idea why? Does anybody know why that would have come unstuck? Sorry, everybody.
No, it's done on there. Why has it done this?
Anyway, like I was saying, luckily there's lots of things going on in adolescence. So here are some sort of examples of what might be going on, and not in any particular order, but people... I'm not going to touch that. People could be leaving their parents' home, finishing education, starting jobs, forming partner relationships, having children. And so we've identified these as sort of 5 key life transitions that might happen towards the end of adolescence and into early adulthood. And some people might go through some of these and not all of them, and like I said, in different orders. But then we can think about these life transitions and say, well, someone's starting a job, but at the period of time when they start their job, obviously they're going through a new experience, and what influence might that have on their diet? And to do this, you need some nice longitudinal data where you follow people over time, you have some information about what's going on in their lives, and information on their diet across a period of time. And there's not that much great data on this from the UK, but luckily we were able to work with 2 data sets which did have longitudinal data over the period of adolescence and into early adulthood. And these were firstly the Project EAT dataset, which is from Minnesota in the US. And so this had 4 waves, so collecting data on the same people at age 15, 20, 25, and 30. And that was in almost 5,000 people. And then a second dataset was the Norwegian Longitudinal Health Behaviour Study, which started at 14. And as you can see on the diagram, there were many more waves of data collection. So these are all the years when they were collecting data, up to age 30. But this was a smaller study of just over 1,000 people. So to start with the Norwegian study, this study did not have a comprehensive measure of diet. So we had 4 questions about consumption of fruit, consumption of vegetables, consumption of sugary snacks, so confectionery, and sugary drinks. But at every time point, at every age. And then some questionnaire data on who do you live with and what's your current vocational status that enabled us to get to things like whether you're living with a partner or your parents or whether you're in education or employment. And so we could look firstly at how diet changed over this age range and then try and look at these different life transitions that people are going through. So how did diet change? Well, firstly, you've got different results for males and females. So males on the left graph, females on the right, and on the x-axis, this is age, so this is change as people are getting older. And then on the y-axis, you've got the times that they consumed each of these different food items per week. And so what you see is that the healthier food items, the fruit and the vegetables, start off relatively high. They seem to decrease into the early 20s and then get a bit better again as they get towards age 30. And the inverse for the less healthy food items, sugary snacks and sugary drinks, SSBs as sugary drinks, tended to start off low, get higher into the early 20s, and then improve again. And you had slightly stronger effects for males and females. So that's sort of the underlying trend over time. And then on top of that, we could look at these life transitions that I've already talked about. And so we looked at all the different life transitions to see whether there were specific changes happening at each of these transition points. And what we found was when people left their parents' home, they decreased their fruit and vegetable intake. And when they finished education, they increased their sugary food and drink intake. And that was sort of on top of the underlying trend that we've seen already. So you can think about various reasons why this might be happening. I mean, thinking about maybe when your parents are no longer putting the fruit and vegetables on your plate in front of you, you might be less inclined to eat fruit and vegetables. And then for the US study, it was a sort of similar study setup, but at this time the question was about fast food intake. So how many times per week are you eating fast food? And just across 4 waves this time. But similarly, there was questionnaire data on living arrangements and education, participating in employment and education, and parenthood. And in this data set, similarly, we could look at the underlying trend with a sort of similar kind of result in that people were most unhealthy in their early 20s, so they're eating most fast food in their early 20s. And then on top of that, look at the transitions that people were going through. And so for fast food, we found firstly that an increase in fast food was seen when people started employment and when they had children. And then a decrease in fast food was seen when they left the parents' home and when they moved in with a partner. And again, you can start to think about reasons why that might be happening. But actually, in these data sets, we don't have more detail. So we can't go into the reasons why people are eating more fast food when they have children. I mean, as a parent, I can imagine that maybe you don't have very much time, and that might be contributing to your increased intake of fast food, but we weren't able to sort of investigate that in this data set. But I'm now going to pass over to Struan, who's going to talk a bit more about the different things that might influence your diet and think through what might be happening across these transitions in terms of these different environments that people go through.
Thank you, Eleanor. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Struan Tait. I am a study coordination assistant within the department. And today I'm going to be talking about how our different experienced environments influence our dietary behaviors. So when we start thinking about our diet and our eating behaviors, we immediately start to think about our kind of more individual factors. So whether a food is tasty for us, whether we're planning on cooking, whether we're any good at cooking, whether we have an interest in cooking. Then there's wider context. So it might be something like your mental health. It could be how much physical activity you do. However, in reality, it is a lot more complicated, and the external food environment heavily influences our dietary behaviors, often without us really understanding it, or without us realizing it, sorry. So in public health, we like to think about like the kind of food system that is affecting us, because if we can improve that food system, then we stand to make improvements in the health of populations at a time. And a lot of the transitions that Eleanor has been talking about just now were about, for those adolescents, the biggest changes come in the external food environment. So I'm going to break down this diagram a little bit more. This is just one way of kind of arranging these ideas. So to begin with, we've kind of got like the financial slash economic environments that are affected on us, and they are often somewhat balanced by time. So if you're trying to keep costs down, it means that you end up having to spend more time cooking a meal. And likewise, if you want to instantaneously have foods, you end up needing to spend more money. It's just, unfortunately, some of the unhealthiest dietary choices occur when both of those factors, when we don't have enough of both of those factors. And then moving outside to the kind of the social environment, so moving outside to like the social environment, there's been a lot of, so the way that works is it's like how your friends and family kind of affect change on you. So it might be through like peer pressure, it could be through just like socially normalizing something. So there have been some research conducted over in America where they showed that for, I think it was 12,000 participants over a period of 32 years, the rates of someone starting to live with obesity increased by 57% if someone else in their social circle also started to live with obesity. And then there's the kind of physical food environment. So this is the stuff that you can see, the things that you can touch. We see it in our home food environment, so that's like things in the fridge, whether you've got a fruit bowl in your kitchen. There's the school/workplace food environments. That's the type of food that you can get from a shop or something there, or the facilities that might be available to you, if you've got a microwave, if you have a fridge, things like that. Then there's the like neighborhood food environment. So are there restaurants nearby to you? What do the shops look like? And are there like takeaway food outlets available to you? Tom Burgoyne, a researcher in our department, has shown that in neighborhoods where there are higher, kind of a greater exposure of takeaway food outlets, the people there tend to be living with obesity at much higher rates. And he didn't only show that in where people were, where it was in the home environment, but he also showed that this occurred when you were exposed to more takeaway food outlets in like your work environment or your commute. So compared with those that were least exposed, those that were most exposed to takeaway food outlets on average consumed about 40 grams worth of takeaway food more, which is about half a packet of fries. And they also had higher BMI scores. However, this data was conducted with Finland data, so that means that it wasn't entirely all about adolescents. So there would definitely be good cause for doing this type of analysis, specifically in adolescents, as we know that a lot of takeaway food outlets tend to congregate around schools, and as well as the susceptibility of like adolescents to cheap takeaway food. So bringing it back to the adolescents, I'm going to kind of explore some ideas around why they might, like how their food environments change. So leaving the family environment, the family home, they might find themselves more physically accessible around like fast food and takeaway kind of restaurants. So it's physically more accessible. That also might mean that it's more socially normalized to go and eat from there, and it will almost certainly also be cheaper as well. This image sort of just represents like if you were to start to live in a household with people that follow a different dietary pattern to you. So this one specifically is like as if you were to move in with people that were all vegetarians. It would socially make it more conducive for you to also be vegetarian, and you might feel peer pressure to if you didn't want to follow that diet. Physically as well, like there would be more fruits and veg available within the kitchen, and economically someone might be more likely to share the cost of vegetables with you, so make it a bit more easier. And yeah, so down here, for adolescents, they have never really had so much financial responsibility as when they start to leave the home, and there'll be a lot more on their plates than just food, so it might mean that the more expensive but more nutritious foods might get left off the shopping list. And then here, this is just kind of a representation of how all of these aspects can affect us at once without us really even realizing. So this is someone commuting. They're physically, like, they see the same advertisement over and over again, might make it socially, like, they'll normalize it, and the advertisement of the price as well kind of, it all comes together so that in a moment of need where you need something to eat and you don't really have the mental capacity to go and decide something, that's a kind of subliminal manipulation of your decisions. So looking again more at like real life examples of how this takes place, I went around and took pictures of my food environment at work. We have a lot of adolescents who kind of use the facilities as well. We have like a sixth form college nearby, we have medical students, and we have young workers who come and use the facilities. So every day, if you're wanting a hot meal, you are given the choice of a Burger King or kind of a more traditional kind of like canteen where you can get fresh food and it's generally healthier. But you literally have to walk past the Burger King every single day in order to even get to the canteen. Except this choice isn't exactly always fair. The Burger King is open more than the canteen. The Burger King is open at weekends and it's open later on in the day. So if you are needing a meal outside during those times, the Burger King is somewhat made for you. The choice of a Burger King is made for you. Looking around, there are, there's lots of vending machines throughout the whole kind of building, but the kind of healthier options, so bottles of water and kind of the nut bars and kind of granola bar type things, they are not anywhere near as prominent as the kind of salty, sugary snacks and beverages. So again, if you want a healthier choice and it's not available to you, that decision is somewhat made for you. There are fresh fruits and veg available in a kind of supermarket type shop. I mean, you can see a lot of these vegetables are they are really fresh and you would need to prepare them. So unless you have the access to the facilities to do that, you are sort of locked out of these options. Whereas in contrast, the kind of more food on the go, meal deal type of options are plentiful. They vastly outweigh the kind of, they're definitely the majority of options here. And then finally, I just wanted to explore a little bit about the home food environment. So for a lot of these adolescents, they end up leaving the home and starting living with others. And it often means that any kind of kitchen space is equally divided per person. And with time constraints and food probably not being the biggest priority of people, it means that something, say, like a big bag of spinach that might go off quite quickly and take a lot of space, would probably lose out to, say, something like a pizza, which is more, it's literally more dense and it will last longer. So yeah, looking back at my time at university, I think a fridge like this would have really helped. But yeah, okay, thank you everyone. These have been very UK-centric examples, and I'm going to pass over to Tiago, who has been conducting a lot of research in the context of African cities.
Thank you, Struan. Okay. Hi. As Struan said, spoiling my first slide, I do conduct some of the research that Eleanor and Struan presented into the African context. So for most of you, those environments have resonated to you, like maybe the work environment was similar, or like the home environment was similar. But now try to think about how this looks in other parts of the world, right? So what I'm going to try in my 10 minutes section is to have a little trip with you to those wonderful places and try to think and how the food environment is different to the UK, right? So normally, when I say a convenience store, you might think on that, but imagine that your convenience store is a little bit more like this one. Also, you can have like this, a street food vendor that is all setup, but also you can have some more casual street vendor, right? Or you have this picturesque open air market, very beautiful, very neat, or you can have the chaotic streets of Nigeria, right? So I'm part of the Global Diet and Physical Activity Network at the MRC. We basically work to prevent non-communicable diseases such as obesity, diabetes, or cardiovascular disease. Those diseases are getting worse and worse in low and middle income countries. And there are two big reasons, among others, why this is happening, right? One, because people are eating unhealthy diets, and two, because they are not getting enough physical activity. This, on top of that, is intensified in cities that are growing really fast, right? And these cities are growing fast, are not being built in a good way, which means they are making it hard to people to eat healthy or to do exercise. And I'm going to show you some data that we have collected. This is preliminary data, so take everything with a pinch of salt, but those are the experience of my last summer in those 4 cities. So I went to Yaoundé, capital Cameroon, to Lagos, the biggest city in Africa and one of the biggest in the world, Soweto, near Johannesburg in South Africa, and the lovely Cape Town. So what we did, we have in-country teams. This in-country team conducted surveys examining the food environment, as Struan have mentioned about different types of food environment. What we decided to do is like we select some neighborhoods, some better off than others, and we walk the 25% of the whole streets of those neighborhoods, right? So in the end, we had around 800 routes and more than 30,000 data points. It looked like this. So we have a neighborhood, the streets in yellow, we have a random household, and we have, which is the green dot, we have the red dot, which is something interesting in your neighborhood, a place where you will go. It can be a supermarket, but it can be a church, it can be just a park, places where people will leave their house and walk towards that destination. And we created a route of 500 meters, around 500 meters, towards that destination. And alongside the route, we were collecting data about the food places where they can buy groceries, also about street amenities. We also collect data about food availability and elements of the safetiness of the roads. So one of our first questions, because we have many, and I selected some for today's presentation, is where people buy their food. So in those 4 countries, if we put all the data together, we find that people mostly buy in small stores alongside the route, kind of like convenience stores type of shop, right? Those look more or less like this, right? Then we wanted to know also how is between cities, right? Is there variation between cities? So what you see on the top left and then the bottom right are the extremes. You can see that Cape Town, all of them have more small stores along the route, all of them. This is the predominant type of place where they buy their food. However, in Cape Town, they go much more to supermarkets. In Yaoundé, they rely much more on street vendors, right? So we can see some differences on what so many times they put it under the same box, which is Africa, right? But we see that there is variation between different cities. Also, to highlight that we use a questionnaire that was made in high-income countries, then adapted to some medium-income countries, but we realized that the questions were not really suitable for collecting data in places with a high heterogeneity of like socioeconomic status. So this is just to bring awareness that we as researchers, we also need to think on the instruments that we are using to collect our data. So we also collect data about the socioeconomic status within each city, because we were seeing a difference of places where they buy the food, where they go. So here you can see like from like a small store on a road, I think that was Soweto, to like a very fancy shopping mall in Cape Town. And we decided to look at the data split into neighborhoods that were richer against neighborhoods that were poorer, right? And we can see that although the number of surveys vary a little bit, the shape is similar, right? So small stores along the route keeps predominant. What we started to realize is that the number of surveys was, or the absence of nulls were bigger on the neighborhoods that were richer. So, which neighborhoods do you expect to have more food options? Would you expect the ones that are richer? Would you be expecting the ones that are a little bit poorer? So our data shows that actually the poorest neighborhoods, like on the socioeconomic status, are the ones that have more food options. We found, although it's a little bit counterintuitive, this graph, the richer neighborhoods have much more routes with none or no food options. So when we're looking at the data, we will find that many routes on the richest neighborhoods, they didn't find anything. And that actually triggered some of like my memories this summer when I was in some of those neighborhoods, especially in Johannesburg and Cape Town, where what I remember are like tall walls, no people on the street, and cars. So people normally will drive to a big supermarket to buy their food, but they won't rely on small convenience stores or street vendors as might do in other neighborhoods. So have you thought about living in an area where you cannot buy food? Or like, I don't know if you are familiar with the term of food desert, right? But wherever you go out and you try to buy food and you really cannot, or even you will go to a convenience store, but nothing that is there, as the student was showing on the work environment, you cannot cook anything, right? And how this can impact your health. So now, I want you to think about your local supermarket or your convenience store, the normal place where you go, and try to count how many fruits are there. So your local supermarket might look a little bit like this, like might be familiar. These are some pictures from my local supermarkets in London. Actually, that's more real actually right now. That's how it looks my Tesco, big Tesco in London. But we have one question. Well, we have a question in the questionnaire was what fruits are available, right? We wanted to know to what kind of foods they were exposed, if they could buy a diverse range of fruits or they were limited to some, right? So they have a list of 30 fruits, and the data collectors will go to several shops along the route and will tick if there was available or not, okay? So this is just a little bit how it looks like, the data composition. We found that mostly there were bananas, tangerines, lemons, and oranges. We regret not asking which kind of others, because we really don't know what that others is. But this is just like a snippet of how the data looked like. More interestingly is some fruits were not to be found, right? And it's okay, some of those here also you don't find them, right? Like And you might think about why is this, and it might be because it's the season. We collect the data in their winter, right? So it's a cross-sectional story. We conduct the data in August, September, nothing else. So maybe seasonal. Well, maybe there is no demand, so they don't import it. Or maybe, I don't know, raspberries need to have like a refrigerator that works properly, that there is not cuts on the electricity to keep them like not like waste. So there are several reasons why you might find some fruits in one place and not others. What we wanted to see is like if there is any difference between rich and poor neighborhoods. So this is just data from Yaoundé, and here the blue bars are the responses from the richest neighborhoods, and the red from the poorest neighborhoods. As you can see, in most of it, we find more availability of fruits in each category on the richest neighborhoods than in the poorest neighborhoods. Even though they have less supermarkets or places to buy it, when they go, they have more variety. And for example, there were some that they were only found in high-income neighborhoods, you know, and then just food for thought, right? Like, why? You know, we don't have the answer. This is, as I said, preliminary data, but some of those were never found in any of the poorest neighborhoods. And yep, so that's the end. And now I'm going to pass to Eleanor just to finish the talk with some more studies. Thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you. All right, so that was a sort of brief trip to Africa. I'm now going to bring us back to Europe and back more specifically to adolescence to try and sort of get a bit closer to some of the question that we were asking about why do adolescents eat what they eat. We've heard about sort of different reasons why that might drive people's food choices. But I've got a few quotes here that were for a study that was conducted in Belgium. So they ran focus groups with young people, asking them, you know, what drives your food choices, and let's talk about it in some more detail. And then they analysed their data and pulled out different themes about what people, and this of course was people's perceptions of why they ate what they ate. And we've heard already people tend to be quite individual focused and find it more difficult to think about the wider food system. But you can actually see that we do cover some of the things that we've already talked about. So in blue, this is more about the physical environment. And these are university students, so they're talking about their student restaurant. Every day you can choose between French fries, mashed potatoes or rice. A lot of students just choose French fries every day because they're there. And then say also during exam periods, free fruit was available. And so you got an increase in fruit consumption. Well, that's like our free sweets. If you put them there, people eat them. In yellow, that's more about time. I want it to be easy. I don't want to spend an hour cooking just for myself, so I get something really quick and easy. And someone else being really honest, the faster my meal is ready, the better, so I can watch the television. I mean, sometimes it's not lack of time, it's just prioritising time, what you actually want to spend your time on. Maybe that might not be cooking when you're quite young. And then the social aspects that, again, Struan introduced. Someone saying, I live with my girlfriend, but if I lived with myself, I would pay less attention to my diet. And I'm happy my mum prepares my meals because that means that I don't eat pizza all the time. So these different sort of social aspects of who's putting the food in front of you, who are you living with and eating with, that might sort of influence your behaviour a little bit. So this is sort of asking people about what they think. Obviously, it's people's perceptions of what's going on. But we wanted to look at this in a bit more detail, and then again in this country. So we have started working on the DEBEAT study, which is, the study is called the Diet and Eating Behaviours across Early Adulthood Transitions study. And this study is looking specifically about one transition initially, which is the transition from school to the year after school. So we're looking at people who first they start in year 13, so the last year of school. When they're exposed to the school environment, they're probably living at home still. And then we're following them up over the next year to wherever they go, basically after school. So that could be into employment, it could be to higher education, it could be to a gap year. To try and understand how the environment's changing and how that influences their changes in diet over time. So we want to collect data on diet, of course, across both these time points. And collecting data on diet is actually not that easy. So I talked earlier about questionnaires where they just asked about fruit and vegetables and sweets and so forth. But actually, if you want a good measure of someone's diet quality, you need a comprehensive way of measuring diet. So everything that they've eaten that sort of reflects their usual diet that they eat throughout the years, months. And there's various ways to try and do this with the sort of limitation that everything is self-reported. So you're always asking the person, what have you eaten, in different ways. So the best way that we've got at the moment is called Intake 24, which is a 24-hour recall. So basically you're asked, and this is an online system for doing the 24-hour recall, you're asked to go onto this website and it takes you through systematically everything that you ate the previous day. So you go through your different meals, it sort of gives you images to help you select the portion sizes, it prompts you whether you had ketchup with that, did you have milk in your tea, did you have anything between those meals, did you have a snack after the last meal, and it tries to prompt you as much as possible to try and capture a full picture of what you ate the previous day. So we're asking people to do this 3 times to get a sort of reasonable picture of what they're eating in general. And of course, that does have some burden. So the downside is it takes 10 to 20 minutes to complete every time, and trying to get adolescents to fill in surveys is never that easy. So we're asking them to do this in year 13 and then the following year. And then, of course, we've also got questionnaires about their external food environments and various individual questionnaires as well, trying to get at what's available in the school, what's available, where are they living. We can sort of map that onto what we know is available in different neighbourhoods. And then the following year, if they're moving house or if they're moving to a workplace or a university, again, we can look at what's available in the place where they're living and working, and what's available in the streets around where they live and work. So this study is currently in pilot phase. The first wave will be September this year. So if you are a young person who's going to be in year 13 in September this year, or if you know any young people who are going to be in year 13, well, the next academic year, come September, do send them our way. We're obviously looking for people to take part. We're trying to recruit 1,500 people to take part in this study. And there's more information on various social media sites and on our website. So that's where we're going to finish. I just wanted to introduce you sort of what we're doing next. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. Of course, we're very happy to take questions. I'll invite my co-speakers to come up and answer any questions as well. So thank you. Anybody, anything?
Questions?
Sure.
Wasn't it the debate study specifically starting off with the students in the beginning of their final year from school?
Mm-hmm.
And then it runs for 1 year. So technically, like, was it just purely time and financial for you, or was to not follow up? Like, it would be interesting to follow up the first year of uni, for example. So,
Yeah. Well, my optimistic plan is obviously if we do well in our first year and our second year, then we would apply for more funding and try and keep going, because there's so many. Yeah, it'd be nice to follow them up for longer. There's other transitions that people will go through, so it would be great to continue the study. But I think we need to get it going first and then sort of prove that we can get this group of adolescents to fill in all our questionnaires and so forth. Anybody else have a question? Yeah?
I work at a further education college, and I despair at the food options that are available. And I'm wondering if you've got any ideas on how we put pressure on vendors and food places to have more options, healthier options. I think as was presented, that's part of the key, isn't it? It's options.
Yeah, and it's always a trade-off between the sort of economic need of the vendors that are in the place to offer what they want to be, what they think they can sell to the people in the further education college, but also your view that you should be providing a healthy environment. I mean, I suppose it depends. I think our hospital is moving in the direction that actually we're not going to have Burger King anymore, and we're going to sort of push towards getting healthier food options and not the really unhealthy. But I think it must come down to the institution to say, this is something we want to support. So it's making the case that actually, a healthy diet is important for not just obesity, but also people's well-being in the short term and things like that. Yeah, mental health,
I've been studying this subject quite carefully for a few years, and things like exercise might be wrong. That was one of the things that we're doing wrong, because if you do exercise, you just want more food. Your biology just drives you. People are driven a lot of the time to eat more than they need, so they can store things in case of famine, which doesn't tend to happen. And I think we're on completely the wrong track. It's all about commercialism. From 1950, the hamburger bar starting, everyone's making money. It's everything. It's the recipe books, it's the food programmes on telly, it's absolutely everything commercial about food that is pushing food at people, and our natural biology makes you want more food than you need. The problem is, if you get overweight, it's very, very hard to lose it with neurobiology. So I think we're largely on the wrong track.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't say that to stop people doing exercise, but I would say like we do.
One of the people I mean is Giles Yo. You know him? Yeah. I mean, he does say in one of his books, exercise. It doesn't mean that exercise is good for health, but the fact that we're driving people to exercise is not good. We've got to look at what people are eating, how much they're eating, how often, and how much they're being encouraged to eat, and all the stuff we've got on offer, because we've got to change that food environment.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, you need sort of both sides. You want to do exercise, but you also need to eat a healthy diet. You can't sort of trade off.
So I can't really hear what you're saying.
Oh, dear.
So maybe this conversation can, you can come closer and talk to each other after the talk's over, because I see someone, other people might have questions.
Have you looked at all at mental health and food? And so I'm thinking things like diversity of plant types, the omega-6 and omega-3 balance, micronutrients, the paucity of micronutrients in ultra-processed food compared with minimally processed foods.
So you're talking about diet influencing mental health?
Yes,
or
so there's a clear link between the sociological factors, the individual diet, and then the physiological mechanisms that then go on to cause depression.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a lot of evidence for diet influencing mental health. I think possibly less in the younger population. So we've done some studies looking in adolescents and trying to look at links between what they're eating and mental health outcomes. And what you see actually is there's a strong link cross-sectionally. So the people who have worse mental health are eating worse diets. But if you try and look at sort of longitudinal relationships to try and see, is it mental health that's causing a poor diet or poor diet that's causing poor mental health, it's really difficult to see difficult to see diet causing mental health. So it's possible that there's something going on, but it's not clearly the diet to mental health pathway from what we've studied.
I would be interested to share that.
We have time for a couple more quick questions.
Tiago, you talked about how there's already been a transition in some of the countries that you're studying.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a transition with regard to the food environment that is about what the vendors are selling, or has there been a change in the vendors in that period as well?
Well, it's a little bit of both. Like, what has happened is, like, in the last, let's say, 20 to 30 years, right? Like, those 4 cities have urbanized very fast, very unorganized. But then the commercial actors have played a big role on this, like, food landscape, right? Like, so what has happened is, like, from more traditional diet base, now there's an ultra process and a lot of availability. And basically it's that, like, it's cheaper, you have a lot of the pressure on the commercial actors, so it's everywhere. So people are, like, in a very short span of time, changing their diet dramatically. And that's why we're seeing the increase of non-communicable diseases. It's like as nowhere else, right? Like some African cities have like much more obesity than high-income countries, which like maybe 20 years ago, that would be like unbelievable, right? Thank you.
One last question, maybe?
Oh, it's not that. Just a question about the beat study. Are you pushing just in the Cambridgeshire area or more broadly across the UK?
Across England, not into Scotland, and well, particularly not into Scotland because the education system is slightly different. We didn't want to really go there. But in order to get these numbers, we have to sort of, and also to get, we want to get some diversity, not everyone just going to university, people going into different routes. So, yeah, it's across England.
Are you working with schools to do that?
Yeah.
Where has the best diet, in your opinion? Which region? Like parts of Asia or Japan? Or what would you think? No?
Well, there's some sort of promoted diets. So the Mediterranean diet is a sort of well-known, good quality diet, but that doesn't mean that everyone in the Mediterranean regions is necessarily eating the Mediterranean diet. The Japanese diet is supposed to be healthy, but I mean, I haven't done a comparative study across countries.
No, either, but what I can tell is like the influence of the commercial actors play a big role on the opposite side, right? Like countries with less tight regulations on what the companies can do normally have worse health outcomes related to diet. So but I will say that there's many goods and benefits, pros and cons in different diets. I wouldn't say that it's an ultimate diet. Yeah.
Okay, well, I would like to give a massive thank you to the speakers for a very interesting talk. If you want to still be around and take a few more questions, maybe we can move outside just because we have to close down the building. We are the last people left in the building, and I have been tasked with closing everything down. But thank you everyone for coming.